America owes $38 trillion. But who actually owns all this debt? The answer might surprise you. To understand it, we first need to know what national debt really is. When the government spends more than it collects in taxes, it has to borrow money to cover the gap. It does this by selling Treasury bonds, which are essentially IOUs. Investors buy these bonds, and the government promises to pay them back later with interest. Over decades, this borrowing has added up, pushing the total debt to about $38 trillion. So the big question is, who owns all these bonds? The debt is divided into two main categories. About $7 trillion is intragovernmental debt, which means the government owes money to itself. The largest holder here is the Social Security Trust Fund. Social Security collects more in payroll taxes than it currently pays out, and it invests that surplus in Treasury bonds. Other trust funds, like Medicare and federal pensions, do the same. In simple terms, part of the government is borrowing from other government programs. The remaining $31 trillion is held by the public, and this is where it gets interesting. Roughly 60% of U.S. debt is owned by Americans and American institutions. The single largest holder is the Federal Reserve, which buys bonds to manage the economy and control interest rates. Regular Americans also own a large share through pension funds, retirement accounts, and mutual funds. Banks and insurance companies hold bonds as safe investments to protect customer deposits, and state and local governments invest in them as well. A huge portion of America's debt, in other words, is actually owed to Americans themselves. The other 40% of the debt is owned by foreign governments and investors, totaling about $8 trillion. Japan is the largest foreign holder, followed by China and the United Kingdom, with other major holders including countries like Luxembourg, Ireland, and Switzerland. Despite common claims, China owns less than 3% of the total U.S. debt. Foreign countries buy U.S. Treasury bonds because they are considered the safest investment in the world. The United States has never defaulted on its debt, and holding treasuries also helps other countries keep their own currency stable. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. The U.S. gets funding, and investors get safety. So, is $38 trillion of debt dangerous? Economists disagree. Some argue the level of debt is unsustainable, while others believe it's manageable as long as investors continue to trust U.S. bonds. The real concern isn't the total amount of debt, but the cost of servicing it. The United States now pays over $600 billion each year just in interest, more than it spends on the military. As interest rates rise, these payments grow, leaving less money for things like schools, roads, and healthcare. Still, as long as investors keep buying U.S. bonds, the system continues to function. In the end, America's $38 trillion debt breaks down into three main parts: about $7 trillion owed to government programs like Social Security, roughly $19 trillion owned by Americans through institutions and investments, and about $8 trillion owned by foreign countries, led by Japan and China. That's who actually owns America's debt.